All right. Well, OBS shows our faces, and the little bars are telling me it's hearing me at least. So I think we're live. I guess we'll find out, and hopefully, if we're not, my
We'll
wife
find
will
out.
inform me of that. But good afternoon, Neil. I feel a little bad that you and I aren't doing this in person since we're essentially neighbors. We're not that far apart. We're both in the great state of Minnesota, where the weather is actually very nice today. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I think we're other sides of the Twin Cities, but in an hour we could probably meet up.
Yeah,
So
and
neighbor.
it occurred to me this morning that I'm probably gonna have to talk to like Layla and Tasha about like what would a portable streaming thing look like? Because I think it would be kind of cool. I assume at some point we'll get back on airplanes and I'll get to go visit people, and I'll have an opportunity to like do this live with a guest instead of over the facsimile that is Zoom. But I don't know what that means in terms of what kind of gear do I have to Sherpa my way through the airport with. So I'm hoping that Layla will have some thoughts on that at some point.
Well, the first podcast I did was with Victor Gamoff in London, and he had a single unit device, so
Sure,
pretty small, so he could take it to the airport. Worked great, but I think there was a fair amount of post production they had to do to take care of ambient noise
sure.
and all that other stuff that was quite frustrating. So maybe there's better stuff, but you could talk to Victor, I guess, to get the scoop on that one.
Well, and Kote has done a lot of that. I've done podcasts with Kote where we're always in a different city and usually not in the U.S. So I have a very fond memory of doing a podcast with Kote in my hotel room in Paris at this hotel. I think it was the W, if I remember right. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. But every time he does one of those, he's got a different setup. So I don't know what the right magic is. And I guess we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Different setup every time. That's got to be rough, I guess, in a good way and a bad way.
I mean, I think he likes it because it's fun stuff to play around with. That it's always like, hey, let's try this mic out. Let's try these headphones out. But I know at one point he and I did one that was just, it was all on his iPad. It's just, a couple of the mics and cables, and that was that. And it worked out pretty darn well. That's still out there somewhere in the ether. A few years ago now, but it's on the internet, so it's permanent. Oh, anyway. So we will get to Ted Lasso. I think that's abundantly obvious if you've seen any of the tweets over the last couple of weeks. I've been very excited about this one because I want to get into that storyline with you. But before we do that, we should probably just like touch on some techie stuff. So let's begin where I always begin, which is tell us your origin story. How'd you get into this crazy software world? And what brings you to this unfortunate place that you're sitting on a Zoom call with me on a random Monday?
Well, let's see. It started early on wanting to be an astronaut, as many kids do. And then first grade, we went on a field trip to my teacher's house where her husband worked at the university or the Southwest State University in Marshall, Minnesota.
Okay.
And he showed us his dial-up computer where you put the phone in the handset. He called the university. He asked the computer a question. It returned a response. Then I wanted to be in computers. That's pretty much the short end origin story to how I got interested in it. And I haven't really changed since. I went into computer science education, which after high school, which is what I wanted to do within the U of M system up at Morris. Continued on after that, worked in the field for now 5 years, and now get the opportunity to present that, speak about it, primarily around Kafka. People know me over the last few years, and now I work as a principal solution architect at Real Data, getting to advocate, help, and build stuff. So the 2-minute version of how I got
Yeah, you and I overlapped. We won't get into all the details on
here.
that. That's you and I at one point worked together. And one of my I guess favorite memories. I was presenting at a conference that weekend, and you asked me what talks I was delivering, and I just sort of shrugged and said I'm not sure. And you were somewhat surprised by that. And it's like, well, it's the fall. I've been giving these talks all year. I feel pretty comfortable where I'm at, and it was an interesting exchange, as I recall, from many years ago now. But
Yeah, and it's interesting because I remember it too a little bit differently. I remember it more of
shocking.
like how you can go up on. So Nate did a talk at the company that we were overlapping at, and he just went up there and presented a great talk over the content. Everyone enjoyed it. Um, not nervous about it. You can tell that you've done it before. And then you encouraged me to do a talk. And I don't even remember what it was about. It was something with the technology we're doing at the client or client to me. And we talked about it. I probably sweated tons while I was up there, nervous as heck. And, but the content was good. At least I thought so. It was relevant to what they were doing. And you praised me for doing it, and I felt horrible doing it because I'm like, this isn't what I'm used to doing. So I looked at it as more of you helping me become a speaker or to present my knowledge to others. And you were just the natural teacher up there, helping them as well. And yeah, I do remember you saying that you didn't necessarily know what you were talking about yet, and I couldn't believe that. So
Well, in fairness, it's all it's material that exists. You know,
yeah,
I don't quite have Venkat's ability to open up a text editor and ask for some bullet points and then proceed to create 60 minutes of content on the fly. I'm not quite that good. If it exists, I can pretty much deliver it. You know, just ask me when you want me to start. But you know,
right.
I'm not so great at the just off the cuff ad hoc stuff. I'm going to definitely pull back things that are already in my bag of tricks, as they say.
I got the sense you had like a 200 slide deck
Oh,
that you
small
would
for me
pull.
then.
Yeah, maybe back then, or X number, and you would basically pull things out of your encyclopedia deck and build a new talk from it.
Yep.
Is how
Yeah.
I
That's how they
imagine that.
all tend to work. You know, they kind of grow from one another and you take little
Yeah.
pockets from here. That's my biggest complaint with Keynote, by the way, is I can't include slides and other slides. In
Oh,
my perfect world, I would have sort of a canonical block for each of these topics that I would then include, you know, use composition on these other decks so that when I needed to edit them, I only went to one place to edit them. Because here's what happens: you pull chunks into 4 or 5 different presentations, and then you start updating it with things or new tidbits or whatever, and then you think, oh yeah, I've got that in another deck, and it's this one, and wait, was there another one? Ah, it's probably okay. And then you deliver that deck and you're, wait, where's that slide? Oh, I didn't update this one. You know, that's always a
oh.
lot of fun when you have that experience as you're delivering it that you didn't actually update all of them.
So that's the Stack Overflow approach, I guess, where we copy and paste in, and that's
Unfortunately,
what I do.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
haven't found a way to get around that with any presentation tool that I'm aware of. I mean, I'm sure there's something out there that can do it, but nothing that I have yet to encounter. So, but I think that's an edge case, yeah, for many
okay.
people. I,
Do you still use Keynote? Because that's what
yes.
I use.
Yes,
Okay, I'm a big
Keynote's my
Keynote.
preference. I'm a big fan. I find edge cases in Keynote. They put it that way. I have a block right now. I did a software engineering fundamentals thing, and it's 3 3 hour blocks, and so each one's about 1,100 slides, and that's about where Keynote starts to creak a little bit. Gets a little grumpy with you, and you hit save, and it takes it 30 seconds to save, and then it'll just mysteriously quit. So
My big what I like what I learned about Keynote after the fact is I had for Kafka Summit 2020, I believe. So it was virtual. As we all know, we've done these virtual conferences. I had to mail or upload my talk to the people doing the recording, and the thing was huge.
yeah.
So I unzipped it because all it is a zip file. One of the PNGs for one of the logos, I think it might have been Mongo. I don't know which one it
Hmm.
was massive. So I
Sure.
downloaded a clip art, and it was why so I knew what to replace then, went into my
Right.
slide deck, found that image, uploaded a smaller one, and it went from megabytes to a megabyte or something on that. So that's my edge case of Keynote. I now unzip the key file
There you
and
go.
see what's eating up disk.
Nice, nice. It is amazing how big images can make things. For Spring One, Beth asked for my slides for that Jakob and I used, and so I sent them to her. Said, "Do you have anything smaller?" I'm like, "What do you mean? You know, can you compress it?" I'm like, "That's as small as it gets." And she's like, "Oh, okay, well, we'll figure something out." Okay, so yeah, they're not small, but what are you gonna do? What do you
Yeah, I did embedded video on the talk last year,
do? Hmm.
and I had to sign up for Dropbox Premium in order to upload, so the production agency could
Yep.
actually get the slide deck.
Yeah, for all of our Spring One virtual events, that's what we've done. At least I've had to do that, right? I give
Yeah,
it to Josh on Dropbox. I'm like, here you go, and he does some magic to it.
yeah.
So let's poke at Kafka a little bit. How'd you get involved with Kafka? What excites you about Kafka? What keeps you coming back?
That's That covers a lot in the last
right?
4 years. Well, Kafka being a hot technology, working for a consulting company at the time, it was a good opportunity to find work, exciting work, working with new clients. And Sarah, the sales rep, partner lead with Confluent at that company, brought me in and helped me work with that. And I enjoyed the technology. It kind of fit into my wheelhouse. So back a dozen years ago when we worked together, Hibernate, working with relational databases was what I was brought in for to work on. This kind of was an extension of that. So I felt it's Java based, it's technology, it's not front end work. I like doing that. And it just became very enjoyable solving these problems. So I just wanted to learn about it and become the expert in it, at least within our organization. It was a lot of learning, but as a consultant, you kind of have to do that. Others would pick different technologies. I know a lot of front end went through React,
Sure.
still do Angular. And this was sort of what I latched on to help build up a real-time practice, help drive that business. And you asked, I like solving the problems that it gave me opportunity. I kind of stayed because of the people.
Sure.
It's the group of people I get to work with at the Confluent community. So they have a Catalyst program that I'm involved with. Speaking at Kafka Summit, all the people I get to be involved with there and have gotten to know through Kafka Summit is why I keep doing it. Solving problems and working with a fun group of people directly and indirectly is why I'm still doing it and why I seek out work that allows me to continue to do it.
Well, if I'm interpreting the handle correctly, I believe Mary has joined us here. Comments. Hi. So good morning. It's afternoon for you as well, Mary. So thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. So she says hi to both of us. So you bring up an interesting point. This is one of my soapboxes. You know, this industry moves so fast, and there's always new stuff to play with. You know, you bring up Hibernate. I mean, I remember when Hibernate was the new hotness, and you know, it just there's constantly new things. Do you have any tips, tricks, techniques that you've used to sort of learn new things, pick up new things? Because you know, we generally don't get a lot of time. It's like, hey, this project is rolling, get going. You know, what do you do to sort of jumpstart your learning?
Oh, I mean, being a consultant, what you hope for it happened was you could find client work where they need senior developers and they're willing to have you learn on their time, so to speak, helping them with new technologies as you build it. So you get the on-the-job training, which I think is critical regardless if you're employee or not. If you're working for a company, I hope the company drives and leverages people to learn the new technologies and gives them time to incorporate it, understand it. I know a lot of companies give people like Fridays or part of a Friday to explore something new. I think companies that have that or have hackathons or something to help drive that learning is important. I think it's foolish to think that people have enough time to do this on their own.
Right.
I went to school. I did 6 years of education after high school. That's a lot of work. I don't have that same amount of time to continue with it. But I also look at people that you have to at least have an interest in learning it.
Right.
If the company needs to invest in giving you time to do it.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to step out of your comfort zone and become a novice at something, not to become the expert at something, having to become the person asking coworkers questions or where am I going wrong, even if you're 20 years experienced, if you're not willing to be the newbie on a technology and not be the expert in the room, you're going to fail at it. So you have to realize that I have to ask questions. I have to work with others. I have to learn from others. And when companies embrace that and give you the opportunity to do that, then it wins. As a consultant, it's a little bit trickier because they're bringing in consultants to be the expert. So that's a fine line. And when the technology is new or in such high demand like Apache Kafka is, companies are like, I just need experts and we'll work through this together. If you're wanting to do like, I want to be a Hibernate specialist, no one's probably going to say, well, let's bring you up to speed on Hibernate, because I know there's a dozen people in my catalog of references that I can go to. Yeah, it's kind of interesting on that. Trying to think of any other areas. I guess what I look for in people is just the desire to learn. The people that I've worked with, it's so much easier to sit down with when they're eager to figure it out on their own. Deadlines is always the hard part with that. It's like, well, we need this tomorrow. It's hard to level up the skill set when you're also struggling for a deliverable that was due yesterday. So there has to be a management expectation that we're in this for the long haul. We need to bring people up to speed and give people the time to do that.
Well, Zyker or Zicker, I guess I don't know how to pronounce some of our usernames, is a +1 for the Kafka and community, Confluent community. And Mary says, great words of wisdom there, Neil. I agree. I think that's the part that resonated for me, and this is always one of the big challenges, is that willingness to have the humility to say, I don't know something. When you've been in our industry for a while, you're used to kind of being the person who's the go-to, the expert. And when it does take a lot of confidence and humility to be like, yeah, I don't know. Let me learn it too. And a lot of folks aren't willing to take that step back to go from being the expert to being the new person and redoing that in a regular basis. So, kudos there.
Well, the Kafka community, I feel, is very good at that. And there's a Slack channel that we ask questions. And I remember answering someone's question and I got it wrong. Sure. And Matthias Sachs, who is a developer at Confluent, he builds Kafka streams. He works on KSQLDB. One of the smartest people I know. He corrected me, but pointed out what I saw wrong, filled in the person, he helped answer the question, but he didn't like, oh my gosh, Neil, he didn't know what you're talking about. Here's what was going on, and done that. And when you're working in a group of people that's how they work together,
right,
then it's easier for me to jump in. I've jumped in a lot more because I'm trying to help. I'm not trying to be right. Mm-hmm. And others see that, and then they try to help. It's about helping, not necessarily being right. And I get that from that community. I still think I need to learn it a lot. I know that I've enjoyed being an expert or a expert on a technology. So you feel deflated if you don't know it yourself a little bit, but there's so much going on, especially in any areas of technology now, that you have to be willing to be wrong. I think we mentioned in the pre-show, you have to give people the opportunity to be wrong in order to see if they can be right.
Yeah, exactly.
And that, I think, to words of wisdom there is, to Mary, that's key advice.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, that you have to create this community where people are willing to do that and willing to help. And let's be honest, in some tech communities, the response wouldn't have been, well, Neil, let me show you where you were wrong. It's, geez, Neil, you're so stupid for not knowing this. And then that just shuts you down. And you're like, well, I'm never coming back. And that's unfortunate. And I think we all need to be very aware of how sometimes that can come off on Twitter, in a Slack channel, in a PR, mm-hmm. That be aware of what you're saying and how you're saying it, that there are different ways to get that same message across. And my cat has decided to come back. I thought he was going to leave us. At first I thought he was very excited to be part of the Ted Lasso episode. And now I guess he's just going to mess with the blinds because I put them down. So we'll see what kind of trouble that gets us into. So anyway, I think that's a real testament to the community, because I see that in Spring too, that there's so much willingness there to, there are no dumb questions, and of course we'll help you, and here's how to get started. And I think there's a lot to be said for communities that work to bring people along.
Very much so.
Let's see. Oh, we got another. Oh, there's Mary's got the cat. I like that. Yeah, I'm sure he's now going to be a complete pest because I had to put the blinds down.
My dog Katniss tried to get in here, so I think she wants to be part of it too. But
everybody wants to be part of this one. It's the only episode that has its own title. Everyone else is the same. You got a unique title because man.
I got to pester you. I just jokingly said you need a Ted Lasso episode,
And it
and
works. It
you
works.
it worked. So
We've
if
already
only
talked 20 minutes of tech. Should we get into Ted Lasso? Is it
I
time for
think we
Ted
should.
Lasso? All right,
I
all
think
right.
so.
Let's see what kind of trouble this gets us into. So I've been a fan of Ted Lasso from the second I saw it. I remember when that character was just the bumper for this NBC Sports had purchased the rights to broadcast English Premier League games here in the US and to introduce football to an American audience. They take this football coach, American football coach, and he's going to be a coach of a football team in Europe and or in England. And so it's him bungling through all the things about, win, lose, we're going to give you 60 minutes. We play 90 minutes. Oh, and we have ties, and just all those kind of things. And I loved those bumpers. They were great. And then to see them build an entire show out of it, part of me was a little skeptical, like, they're going to have enough material. And then the first episode, I about fell off the couch laughing a half a dozen times. And thank goodness for Ted Lasso. It was the content we needed in 2020. So the one thing I'm really curious about your thoughts on now, I'm very much of the opinion that Ted Lasso is just perfect for the moment. But do you think the reception that Ted Lasso has gotten would have been there regardless of global pandemics? I mean, if it had just been a normal 2020 and Ted Lasso appeared, do you think it would have had as much impact as it clearly has for those of us who've watched it?
Well, I think the show is a lightning in the bottle, writing, acting, that I think it would have succeeded. Um, would it have won 7 Emmys and had the reception? I'm not sure. I think it definitely elevated it.
Yes.
I think how it was released to weekly instead
Mm-hmm.
of all at once gives you the ability to have water cooler conversations. You and I talking season 2,
Yeah.
we can do that while the season's going on.
Right.
When the show all drops as one season, you're like, are you done yet? I don't
Right.
want to risk
Right.
spoiling anything. So we can actually talk about the episodes as they happen somewhat. Now, I
Yes.
don't usually watch them always Friday night, but pretty close
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
to do that. So I think that that release, along with COVID quarantine, definitely heightened the appreciation of the show. Um, I didn't see the advertisements from 2014, or I
Something
think
like that.
when they
Yep.
did that, until after. And actually, I look at those advertisements like they realized what they had to tweak in order to make it a show.
Mm-hmm.
The ads made me think that they were willing to have Ted Lasso be a Jacques Cousteau or the Pink Panther
Yeah.
um, type character where he stumbles upon success by accident.
Mm-hmm.
And they totally rewrote it to where he's really understanding who he is and what needs to be done. But when people don't see that, he doesn't care.
Right.
One of the best episodes I think every episode of season 1 was flawless.
Yeah.
But the episode about Trent Krim, the reporter,
Yes.
and how at the end he became a fan of Ted, that's the show in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And I think it was just perfect. So yeah, I think the show would be successful, but there's definitely something that added to it. Um, I didn't start watching it right away. I thought it was going to be a show like he stumbled upon success, and my son was telling me about it. You need to watch Ted Lasso, and I'm like, yeah, I'll watch Ted Lasso. And then I finally watched. I'm like, oh my gosh, you were right. He's like, I've been telling you this for a month. So
It
I need to listen to my son more, I guess.
we watched it pretty quickly when it came out, and we've rewatched season 1 3 times. So we've seen all the way through 3 times, and I'm sure we'll watch it again. And I have, I mean, anybody who's listened or watched this show knows that I bring it up pretty much every week if I can. And anybody I talk to, I definitely try to get them to watch it. And I've had a few people push back, but everybody that I know who has watched it has walked away and said, "Yeah, that's the content I needed." And
Yeah.
I think that the word that comes back to me is kind. It's such a kind show. Even the grumpy, sort of Roy Kent character isn't mean, and I think that's part of what I really appreciate about the show is the characters are genuine, and there's real emotion there, and and it seems like from what I've read, many of the characters or the actors, they all get along, they like each other, uh, and that's something that you don't always see, and I think that was such a just a beautiful thing to have while we're all dealing with, the ongoing, seemingly endless pandemic.
Agreed.
What I was going to ask you, we should have done this on the pre-show, but
Yeah.
what do you think are some of the like your favorite scenes or lines? I mean, I know I've got a few, and I can make my kid laugh just by asking him how he takes his tea. But is there anything that stands out to you from that first season? And I do agree with your assessment. I think every episode was phenomenal. There's only one episode so far that I'd be like, I was a little iffy. Didn't quite get
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah. When I think everybody would know once they see it which episode that
Yeah,
is. There's so much from season one. I mentioned the Ted, is it Krim? Krim, yeah.
Trent Krim,
Trent. It's Trent Krim.
The
That whole
Independent.
the independent. When Ted orders Indian food,
Yes.
is spicy, or the way the chef makes, the chef's my father-in-law. Okay, and then Trent can't eat, it's too hot, but he's like, we have to make a dent in this food. We have to, otherwise it's disrespectful. That scene stands out. The dart scene, I
Yeah.
don't, the dart scene, and oh, I forgot I was left-handed, which reminds me of Presidio. I don't know if you ever saw Mark Harmon, Sean Connery.
Yes. Yes.
Sean Connery fights with
The
his
left
left thumb
thumb.
because my
The
right
right's
thumb's
too
too
powerful for
powerful.
you.
So, and I don't know if that one was an intentional reference. It may just be that because I liked that one as a
Right.
kid. But there's other things where they definitely pull in threads from other shows or
Yes.
other thoughts that go in. But oh, I wish you could remember the quote that he mentioned about be curious, not judgmental. So the bullseye scene, I think, was a classic, just tying in being, like you said, being a good person, and the show feels genuine. But
Yeah.
the bullseye scene and the Trent Krim scenes are probably season one callouts. But I'm sure there's two from every episode I could name.
The, the
Do
thing
you, do
that's
you have one?
Well, I love the whole scene when Ted Lasso first meets Rebecca, and he just got off the overnight flight from the States, and so he's sleep deprived. He didn't sleep on the flight, and she asks him, do you want anything? Yes, anything. Give me a mochaccino, a frappuccino, anything with coffee in it where I can't taste a hint of coffee. And then probably my all time favorite line is, "How do you take your tea?" Well, usually I take it right back to the counter because there's been a terrible mistake or horrible mistake. I always kind of paraphrase. But then that whole scene to me is perfect because then he sips the tea and he said, I thought tea was just going to be, hot brown water. And I was right. This is terrible. And it's just that whole scene to me is just
Yeah.
perfect. And, the thing that stands out to me so much about the show is it's kind, it's genuine without being syrupy and saccharine, and it could do that. It could just almost be achingly sweet to the point where you reject it, and it isn't. And I think they do such a good job of walking that line, and it's part of it. It just I've never left a show like feeling bad. It's always like, oh, I feel better now, and I laughed and I rewound these scenes because they were so funny, and they were laugh out loud funny, and then I watched them again and they were still laugh out loud funny. And that is a real testament to the writing, a real testament to the acting, that it really does warrant a rewatch in a way some shows don't.
Yeah, very much. I think I watched the first season again a month ago over the weekend because you can,
Yeah,
even at fitting time. And I'm like, I could watch this 3, 4 times without feeling like I've seen enough of it.
right.
So, and there's not too many shows out there where you can do that. Growing up, it was MASH or
Sure.
Star Trek. I had those shows, but that's about it. I don't want to ever watch a TV show again. This is definitely one where I feel differently. So
Have you made the biscuits? Because the biscuit
I have
recipe,
not.
we have a few times, and they're very tasty. So that's usually, in fact, when we did our third rewatch before season two started, Christine made the biscuits so that we could have the full Ted Lasso experience.
Did you get pink boxes to put them in?
We did
And
not. So
okay.
I will suggest that for the next time that she makes them. Although I suspect I know how her response will be to that. But it's a good thing she doesn't watch the show, so it's fine. It's fine. She
Okay.
probably can't even hear me right now, which Oh wait, I'm getting a look from the kitchen, so apparently she can hear me. But
Excellent.
yeah. So this is a loaded question, but do you have a favorite character? Is there anyone that really stands out to you?
Well, season one, it was Ted,
Yeah,
just because the writing for him, um, being Jason Sudeikis and how I knew him before. And I was never a huge Jason. I liked him on SNL, but he wasn't like he was my go-to actor that I
sure.
would get the best line from when I did watch it anymore. To me, it's Roy Kent now.
Yeah.
Roy Kent. The scenes with his niece
Oh my gosh.
are
Yes.
perfect. Um, the swearing that he does. I mean, I never seen a show swear so much and have this still be a I consider it a
Right.
family show, even
Agreed.
though there's things that I should tell my 13-year-old, but I mean, she knows that she's not oblivious to that stuff.
Right. Right.
So she knows that the show's playing on it, but that is just amazing watching him interact with her.
Yeah.
That's just perfect.
Yeah, that is a great relationship. It's been very fun is in season two, and I know we're not getting into season two things just to avoid any spoilers, but it's really fun to see how that relationship continues to sort of grow. And I love the like swear jar basically that he has
Mm.
with her, and it is such. I mean, again, it's very emblematic of a lot of those relationships that there's clearly a lot of love there, and that he genuinely loves his niece, and yet there's still that gruff exterior. I'm Roy Kent, and I think that's part of the secret sauce in that show. And I agree with you. I think his arc this season two, has been really fun to watch. It's been yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have a hard time picking a favorite character. I mean, they all have. It's a lot like Friends in that it's that ensemble that really works so well together. And I read a little bit about kind of the casting for it, and it's always fascinating when you think, boy, they what would this have been if they hadn't had this person be in that role, and where
Yeah.
would the show be where it is. It's a fascinating thing. So one thing where they did talk about that was part of why this person plays this role is because of the chemistry. They were really good.
Yeah, I watched parts again, and I was just looking at how well Rebecca's played,
Yes.
and like that whole Ted being Ted wouldn't work if Rebecca wasn't the way she was.
Yeah.
So definitely has the ensemble feel, and it's like, and I keep thinking of season two, which I don't want to talk about because I
Let's
don't want.
invade France.
um, yeah, very, very, very well done ensemble-esque feel to the second season, even more so than the first. Yeah, even trying to think. There's an episode when I think it's near the end of season one where Beard's saying, "Don't be selfish, Ted. These are grown men. We play to win. We don't play for someone's feelings." And trying to show the balance of a coach being a teacher, but also people are there for them to win and do
Right.
more than just teach. I think there's a lot to learn from that. Beard was had some fabulous lines in season one. Really liked that.
Yeah, I've taken advantage liberally of the Siri feature of what did he just say, to have it skip back 10 or 15 seconds and turn on the closed captions so that you can see exactly what they said, and especially when there's a little bit of an accent or it's maybe gone a little quickly. But I think the other really interesting aspect, and they've definitely gone deeper in this in season two, although they touch on it in season one, is also about the sort of mental health aspect of this, and being more open about talking about that. I mean, Ted has sort of a very classic anxiety issue in the first season, and that I thought was one of the most touching moments of season one is when Rebecca comes out of the karaoke bar they were in, and is there for him in a very genuine way. And I mean, I've teared up watching that scene, even though I know exactly what's happening and exactly what's coming, and I know it's not real. And it's I think I give a tip of the hat for them being so willing to discuss that, and get that out in the open.
I think that's. I mean, all joking aside about us, let's talk about Ted Lasso. It's just a TV show, and it was kind of a joke. I said to you, "You need a Ted Lasso." I mean, but and people go, "Well, it's just television." But I think television at its best is when they talk about the society issues.
Right.
And That's why I was a fan of MASH and I was a fan of Star Trek, beyond the fact that the shows actually made you, elevated you to be better or to think about stuff. And Ted Lasso is doing that with mental issue
Yeah.
aspects. And again, especially in this season, I think that's important. I think for better or for worse, our society is driven by entertainment, and we need entertainment to sometimes show us where we need to be. And I think Ted Lasso is trying to do that. And like you said earlier, it's not doing it in an overhanded way either. It's a very good way to do that.
Yeah, and you're starting to see more of that too. I watching a little NFL yesterday, and there was a vignette about that where a whole bunch of very well-known players were talking about their own struggles with that. And I think especially over the last 18 months, I remember, uh, I had like, not, it wasn't a checkup, but I saw a doctor for something, and one of the questions, of course, is, how you doing? I said, well, you mean besides the pandemic? And she just kind of laughed, and it's like, yeah, we're all kind of dealing with it in various ways. And I think it would be foolish to think we're all just, oh, everything's great, everything's fine, when it's not. And I think that's part of where it's well timed for what we're going through, and kind of giving us that permission structure to have that conversation, and to ask our friends, our family, genuinely, hey, how are you doing? you know what can we do to make things better? Because this has been a tough run for everybody. I think anybody can walk out of this and say, oh yeah, it was fine, it was great, best 2 years of my life. Everybody's got something they're dealing with.
My dog loves it.
Well, okay, so our pets are
So
delighted by it, and my Khan here, who has apparently finally decided to leave me alone, he does have very strong opinions about how morning routine is now supposed to be handled. And so there are certain expectations he has about the way the morning is supposed to go, and when those don't happen, he lays on my keyboard until he gets the appropriate level of attention, and then he goes back about his day. So I do wonder what's going to happen to our pets, when we return to some level of normalcy, although I genuinely think new normal as opposed to the way it was. We're not going back to 2019 where everybody's in the office 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. There's going to be some differences, and really interesting to see what that all looks.
well, I work for a company now where there is no common workplace. We're global. So I work from home even after the pandemic. Now I'll travel more.
Right.
I hope to speak more or go to company meetings on site somewhere, go to clients, be involved with sales, hopefully type aspects. But that's different than being commuting an hour a day somewhere
Right.
here in the Twin Cities.
Right.
So
Yeah, I've been remote for just about 5 years, and I can't ever imagine going back to 9 to 5.
yeah.
I'm sure I could do it, but my son, now being in high school, I have to drive him there, or one of the two of us. It's always that coin flip in the morning of who has to do it. But it's a good reminder of why I don't enjoy commuting, because it's just not a lot of fun. And there's always the interesting traffic issues to deal with and other things, and I don't have any desire to go back to doing that on a regular basis.
I miss I the structure that it provided to allow. I had a routine of when I called my mom. I usually called my mom at 6:50 in the morning or 6:40 on my
Sure.
commute
Sure.
until I got to my destination. So I've struggled with finding that routine. And then on the way home was usually podcasts.
Yeah.
So so I have to find a way to structure that in. I always would tell Tim Berglund, who'd host Streaming Audio, that he's caused me to not call my mom on time because I'm enjoying the podcast too much. And then I don't call her till 7, and she's like worried that I didn't call her yet. So
Did you get
I
in an
tell
accident?
Tim, yeah. So I tell Tim it's his fault,
Checks
usually
out.
on the call.
Checks out.
So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. That's
But
that.
it's not worth the commute. And I need to restructure my life to enjoy those
Right.
um, at home. I've tried running with a podcast. It doesn't work. I have
Okay.
to go back to music,
Okay.
but have to figure out somewhere to weave them in.
I generally listen to podcasts while I work out. That's been my approach there. And so when my workouts change to be more outdoor oriented out on the bike, I don't like having headphones in them on the bike. So then all of a sudden I have all these podcasts that, build up because I haven't had my normal podcast listening opportunity. But yeah, it is interesting to try to find that structure when you work remotely. And I think this is one thing people have struggled with, is being able to sort of shut down, or, it's so easy to just end up working 8, 10, 12 hours. And then so there needs to be some signal to your brain that the day has started, now the day is over, and it's okay to, close the lid on the laptop and turn the phone on do not disturb.
Yeah, I have that problem, but before COVID, just, I mean, and partially is how much programming has been my outlet before I became a
Sure.
programmer, and it still is. So I have a hard time. I try to balance what it's for. Is it me learning, or is it for the company? But yeah, I have a hard time with that. So
So the other thing I was kind of thinking about in terms of Ted Lasso, and how do we sort of weave that into a technical discussion. Part of the message to me about Ted Lasso is this: how do you sort of ingratiate yourself into a community, into a tribe, especially when there's some trepidation, or, you're coming in from the outside. I mean, Ted is very much an outsider coming into Premier League soccer. Vast majority of the coaches are European, they're English. I don't even know if there's an American coach in the highest levels of professional football right now. And so I think that's part of it, is what lessons we pull out of that, to how would we ingratiate ourselves into a new community? What does that look like? How do we be welcoming? We were talking about that a bit on the pre-show, and it's sort of like, what messages can we pull out of that to welcome more diverse viewpoints, perspectives, people into our industry? And I'd like to think that that's part of the message that's embedded inside of Ted Lasso, is trying to get us to be more open to those experiences. And here's what can happen if we are.
yeah, the episode, again, because it's Ted Lasso, we have to bring in an episode. There is the episode where Roy is very upset with man, I'm name blanking here on the, what's his name?
Jamie
The
Tart.
Jamie. Yeah. And Jamie is like, and Roy is like frustrated that Jamie is not treating his talent and taking advantage of it. And Coach Lasso just says to him, to Roy, don't let the wisdom of being older and wise make you forget what you were like when you
Right.
were young.
Right.
And you have to let Jamie get through that. You have to understand where he's at in his career in order to get him to where you think he needs to be, instead of just being upset at him. And I think, again, to try to weave this into a technology show, I think a lot of the communities, and you mentioned it with Spring, and I mentioned it with Kafka, the idea is, you have to remember, there's people at the beginning of their journey.
Yep.
How do you get them? Don't make them feel like you don't belong here because you're too new at it. Try to help them get them there. Don't be frustrated because they can't get there. It's very easy after you've gone through this and go, oh my gosh, why are they doing this? This is the wrong way to do it. But you have to remember, they're just starting. I made the same mistakes.
Right.
The first talk I did at Kafka Summit was in London, 2019. And I did local meetups on similar content as my getting up the energy, the nerve to submit a talk. And I look back at the demos that I built, the code that I wrote. I had so many mistakes that it would never make it to production. But that didn't make my talks bad. That didn't necessarily elevate others to learn. What would have been if I treated everything that I was doing as, this is the way to do it, I made it perfect, look at this, but instead brace your mistakes. And that's kind of how I then made my talk, is I went through how I was going to build up using Kafka streams to challenge it. And then I walked through all the mistakes I made. And that was what my talk was. I talked how I did this and said, I did this wrong. I did this wrong. And I think people actually appreciated that aspect, because that helps them on their journey, instead of just saying, here's what I built, like it, which it's not good in general. But that's where my mind was. I need to build this perfect demo that I want to showcase, and then I can do a talk about it. Well, the journey was really better for a lot of people than anything else.
Yeah, and I think it's so hard sometimes for us to remember that we all started at zero. And I remember the brief amount of time my son played baseball, and I remember thinking to myself, as you watch these kids not know that you run from home plate to first base. Well, why is first base the one to the right, not the one to the left, or not the one in the middle? And it's all arbitrary. That's sport. And then you think, well, you don't know the rules until someone teaches you the rules. And so it's really, really important for us, especially as we advance in our career, to remember that everybody's on this journey and they're at different places on that journey. And it doesn't do anybody any good to look down on someone just because they're where you used to be. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to remember, hey, somebody reached their hand down to help us, and now it's your turn to turn around, reach your hand down, help somebody else, because there's somebody out there that can benefit from your learning, and that journey is almost always the most powerful thing to show somebody. Showing somebody the mistakes you made is like, oh, that's what that error message means. Thank you for doing that. It's really powerful when you watch and the best people alive coding, Josh, Mark, Venkat, these folks who put in an awful lot of time, by the way, to make it look that easy. Everyone thinks like, oh, you just get up there and bang on the keyboard. Yeah, it's not that easy. I mean, Jakob and I've talked about that, and he's very good at it as well. You put in a lot of practice to make it look that easy. But the mistakes are part of the learning experience to show people how you debug it, how you work through it, and it goes, oh, that's what you're thinking, and then they can take that message and apply it. Yeah, but again, it's kind of getting into that humility aspect of you don't know everything. Just because they don't know what you know doesn't mean they're inferior. Reach a hand down, help somebody up. I'll put my
Yeah,
soapbox back under the table here.
there's a colleague that I used to work with before leaving and joining Real, and his desire to learn, his attitude, um, how he soaked it all in, is was infectious. I mean,
Yeah,
I gained so much because he wanted to learn, and I don't think he ever realized that it was his desire to learn that he praised me for improving his knowledge, but I don't think he ever realized how he sought out getting those answers and how he worked on that was a two-way street. I'm
right.
way better of a developer because I got to work with him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's hard to find. And when you find those, you do appreciate them. But I do think with those levels of working with people, developing software, getting people to learn the technology like Kafka, that's when it's very rewarding. When people want to learn it, they're appreciative of it, that you just feed off of that.
Yeah,
And I know when you've done the no fluff just stuff talks and all that, you would always comment on it's really the questions of what people ask that really drive you to come back and do it, because there's a lot of effort into that. And I think we were all encountering during the pandemic, when we do these recorded, pre-recorded semi talks, there's some of that, but there's so little of it, and it really makes it hard.
yeah,
So I think we're all excited to go back to doing these in person, just because that seeing that benefit of people say, hey, this helps me. I mentioned that one summit, I had 3 people from companies say, you gave me ideas on how I can do this within my organization. That meant me enough to keep me wanting to do it, because after it was done, I'm like, this was exhausting, I never
yeah,
want to do this.
yeah, yeah.
So,
The probably one of the best comments I've ever gotten after a presentation. I had a gentleman. I did like a JavaScript toolkit kind of workshop thing, and the person said to me about halfway through the day, he's like, you've given me already this morning, like this whole conference is worth it because of like these 3 tools you showed me, and it's really, I mean, obviously it feels good to hear that kind of stuff, but that's the reward, for being
yeah,
on that side of the podium, and that's, I think if you poll most people who present on a regular basis, that's why we do it, it's to help that one or two people, give them that little nugget. If I can give somebody a nugget, just one nugget in a presentation, I've done my job. And if you walk out knowing something, you're like, oh wow, that's going to save me 5 minutes or an hour. Awesome. Then I've done my job. I've earned my paycheck, and that's why I do. But I love the questions. There's no getting around it. That's my favorite aspect of it, is the interaction. That's what I miss most, for sure.
definitely.
But well, are there any other Ted Lasso things we need to mine? I don't. Man, it's. I feel like we
Well,
could probably spend 2 hours just on Ted Lasso, but then I worry about dipping into season two.
I'm just tell people when you get to season two, you have to see Rainbow. You see Rainbow, get back to us, and you, that to me was a whole different level of how awesome that episode was, or that season. I'm looking at the episode list here to put it up there.
I was this close to rewatching everything this weekend, but I ended up getting too busy. So I.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. And I look at the titles here, like, and you mentioned it is when Ted comforted Rebecca because of her fundraiser, and she
Mhm.
just had enough of her husband. The scene also, the subplot scene of him finding the homeless person that
Yes.
was a musical talent. Um, Again, to try to tie in technology is just, I mean, he saw someone that had the raw had something there that no one else did,
Right.
and I think it's important to for anyone, and regardless of what they're doing, to see that. And I still, when, like I said, when my son told me about this show, I'm like, that's going to be too sappy, too over the
Yes.
top, too much of a, like I said, Panther, Naked Gun. Someone stumbles into success through their own stupidity, and it's so not that. I think that's why yeah, why you and I to this day tweet almost weekly to each other
Yep.
about Ted
Yep.
Lasso.
Well, and I think to your point, and we mentioned this earlier, it could have been. They
Oh yeah,
could have gone over the top. They could have made it sappy, and it's not. And I think the other piece of this that people sometimes get confused by is they think well, if I'm not a soccer fan, it's not going to make any sense. Like the football aspect of it is pretty ancillary. It's just it's a device they can use to bring these people together, and that's really about it. You don't have to understand the offsides rule, to enjoy the show by any stretch of the imagination. You don't need to have watched Premier League soccer to think it's an interesting show. But I think that to me is part of its genius, right? Is that
yeah,
it doesn't they didn't dial all those knobs up to 11. And the other really powerful thing to me about the show, that message it seems to come back again and again, is really about forgiveness and the power of forgiveness, and being able to, okay, this happened, let's learn from it, let's move on. That doesn't have to be the end of our relationship. And that's a pretty powerful thing. I mean, you talk about the Rebecca Ted dynamic, that could have gone very differently. You could have written that to the point of, he storms out of the office and never speaks to her again, but he doesn't. And knowing that she was deliberately trying to sabotage him for the
yeah,
entire, well, most of the first full season, you could really hate her. She could be a very evil character, and I'm so happy they didn't do that. That they allowed, Rebecca to be this full featured character, and really allowed that arc to grow as well in season two. But
yeah. That I was wondering how they're going to resolve the whole Rebecca Ted when that blew up, and you know it was going to eventually
yeah,
happen. How are they going to write it? And you look at it and think there's no good way that they're going to write it. This is where the show is going to fail, and I was wrong.
yeah,
They succeeded. It's like, bad analogy, The Matrix, one of
mm,
the best movies ever made, and they ended it with a question, and they should have left it alone.
yes,
And then they said, "Oh, we need to do more," and they didn't know what to do. You could tell that
right,
they didn't know where they wanted to take the show. At least in my opinion, they had no idea, and they had to force it in. This felt like this could be an ending between them that, not to Matrix level, but something that they would fumble their way through to get to season two. And that's how they got to Matrix well, whichever one, Reloaded, whichever, they fumbled their way to try to get to the next one.
right,
And they didn't fumble at all. For American football term there, they handed it off just fine.
yeah.
So
And it would be interesting to know if they sort of always had that in mind, because there's certainly been shows, Lost springs to mind, that were sort of surprise hits, and it was clear the writers' room had not kind of gone beyond season one. And they're like, "Oh no, what do we do now?" And I think that hurt the show a little bit. And I'd be very curious to know how much of that went into sort of the long arc of this series. And my only concern is that we're not going to get as many seasons as I would like. My guess is that Sudeikis in particular is going to want to hang it up before too long, young kids.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know us any more than he's already given us, right? I mean, they've
Yeah.
stumbled upon a fantastic show that we're all better for, and goes to them for doing it.
The nice thing about television these days, I'm assuming it's nice, is by making 10 episode seasons, it actually gives the actors a life
Right,
potentially to
right,
explore other things. I know traditional shows. I was a big Star Trek Next Generation fan, so I know there was seasons were 26 episodes usually, sometimes 25, occasionally 22. I used to know every number to every season, type thing. Since they make it half or less,
right.
I'm hoping that allows for people to do more than one thing. Because when you're filming every other week, a year's worth, I mean, 2 weeks to make an episode, so to speak, that they crunch in, there's just, you can tell why people get tired of it. So
Oh,
I
right.
hope that he has the energy to keep it going. But there's a lot of people behind it, to write it and do well with it. So I know we'll get 3 seasons. I hope
Yeah,
we get a fourth.
yeah, me too. And it's one of those things where you're also very like I don't want to see it go one season too many. I
Yeah.
always want to have that good memory of it, and I know how hard that can be to sort of keep coming up with good ideas. I mean, this to me is part of why I think Friends is such an amazing show to have lasted as many seasons and kept such a high level. We've been rewatching that with teenager, and it's just every episode I'm like, I forgot how funny this show was. And while a little bit of it's dated, by and large it does stand up to future watching. And so I hope that they get it right and that they end it on the right note. Don't end it too soon, don't end it too long. By the same token, I want it to last forever, but I want it to be great. So I'd rather have 4 great seasons than 5 where the fifth one's like, yeah, they kind of went too far. But
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Friends analogy there is good. I mean, yeah, Friends, there's definitely aspects that dated. I wish that certain sub themes they would have figured out earlier
sure,
than they do now, that they overplayed them. They're not funny anymore.
right.
But in general, doing an ensemble of 6 people and writing comedy, it's hard.
Yeah,
And they
totally.
did find a way to do that well. So yeah, I guess we should ask for 10 seasons of Ted Lasso.
I mean, it'd only be 100 episodes. Friends is like 260 something. So, I mean, it could be done.
Yeah,
You could have 100 good episodes,
I
I think.
doubt they'll give us that many. I'm
No,
thinking,
no,
yeah,
for sure. I think if we get 4 or 5, we'll be blessed.
yeah.
But, well, let me switch gears here a little bit. Let's talk a bit about travel because I'm desperately ready to get back on the road to some extent, and I don't know how much that's going to happen in 2022. But is there any place that you're really excited to get back to? You mentioned London, and I swooned a little bit. That's a top 3 city for me, and this is by far the longest I've gone without being back in the UK, and it does depress me.
Well, if you follow Dave Klein on Twitter, it's 210 days until Kafka Summit London.
He has been
So
counting down.
he's been counting down and he's making it feel like mile markers. And I'm on a road trip with my dad and we're going to Colorado and I can't stop seeing the mile markers.
Mm,
But it's fun. No, I look forward to London just because it's Summit.
yeah,
Kafka Summit to me, there's no other conference that can come close to it just because of what I do, the people I know. So that's it. Otherwise, it'd be just in general to get people see where they're traveling and getting that. I was supposed to go to London last year and talk, and I was going to bring my wife and daughter with me, and then COVID hit.
yeah,
Now, with her being in high school and everything going on, it'd be harder
right.
to make that happen, especially that time of the year that one is. Other places to go, I just would like to to try out a few new places. I
Right.
haven't traveled a lot, um, and I don't travel a lot for speaking. I mean, I travel some now, but we'll see. I know you you mentioned Paris, you mentioned London. I think you've been to Poland.
Many times.
Um, so so you've had quite the play. Which one will you go back to first if it
Well, I know right now London is on my calendar for
okay.
2022, and there's a decent chance I'll get to Berlin, which one city I have not been to. I've wanted to go. The weird thing for me over the last 2 years, is I usually do travel a fair amount, and kind of got to the point where Christine would sort of look at my calendar and be like, "Oh, I'd like to go there and there and there," and then we'd sort of plan our family trips around where I was going to be. And so my son is very well traveled for the age of 14, and so some of it is, well, where do you want to go? And then I'll try to find an excuse to be there. But for me, the big is I miss seeing my friends in the flesh and
Yeah.
being able to go out to dinner, get a cup of coffee, and not worry about one of us going to catch COVID. So that to me is what I'm really excited about. But yeah, I'm hopeful that next year will be more normal, that Krakow will be on the calendar again, Paris will be on the calendar a few times, get to London a few times. I need to go eat at Core again. I'm missing chef's cooking like you couldn't believe. But I'm guardedly optimistic, that we're around the corner here on this event.
Yeah, it definitely feels like we were should have been farther along and then two steps
100%.
forward, three steps back, and
Yeah.
it's getting old.
Yeah, it's been tough with school too, because my son is also in high school now, and dealing with that whole thing has been an interesting mix. Christine mentioned to me that now signed up for driver's ed this winter because he'll turn 15 in February, and that's when you can start getting your permit and all that fun stuff. And I'm really of two minds about that, because on the one hand, I don't enjoy being the Uber driver to the bazillion things that we have to Uber him to, but I'm also a little nervous about, oh, okay, he's old enough to drive.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Where'd my little boy go? So yeah, there's going to be a mix of emotions there. He informed us the other day, and I think I mentioned this with Whitney when she was on the show, that he's interested in going to the homecoming dance. And so Christine and I keep having this conversation, like, think he's going to ask her today, and there's a little bit of this, like, remember when we were young and dating, and same kind of mix of emotions, right? Of, I'm excited about it, but I'm also like, oh my God, how is my kid old enough to be going to homecoming dance?
Yeah.
So let's talk about food. It's lunchtime. I haven't had lunch yet. So is there a comfort meal that you go back to? Is there a favorite restaurant? Where's your favorite place to eat in the Twin Cities? I'm always curious, where folks go. I generally don't eat out when I'm around, because I eat in restaurants so often normally that when I'm home, the last thing I want to do is eat out. Now, of course, the last 18 months, we've actually eaten out. Well, we've had food delivered. That happened last night when we decided nobody wanted to cook. There's an app for
Um,
that.
the place of choice for me is Kyoto.
Oh,
So all you can eat sushi,
oh,
which sounds like, is it risky? But
it
all you
sounds a
can
little
eat.
questionable.
It's not. It's really
Okay.
good. They do. It is definitely, if you get nigiri, or yeah, sushi was so sashimi. So which was with the rice? I always
I can never remember.
it's nigiri without any. I think I used to know, and then it's COVID. I kind of not eaten there enough. They the amount of fish you get to rice is definitely because it's an all you can eat, but it's great. That I have I'm the one that likes sushi, seafood. I have one kid that does, no one else. So
Sure.
when it's work related going out, I go to Kyoto. There's
There you
one
go.
in Rosedale. There's one in Egan. So we each
Okay.
have one somewhat
Okay.
close. Otherwise, we tend to. It's not the overly fancy places. I like to go to places that are not chains.
Yeah.
So the Nook. If we're going to get
Oh
burgers, we
yeah.
go to the Nook
Yeah.
in St. Paul. Which I'm trying to think of the other Blue Door Pub.
Yes.
Another good one that we would go to.
Now,
So
where do you stand on the peanut butter burger?
my wife likes it. I've never tried it.
Oh, you gotta try it. Unless you're allergic to
Um,
peanuts, then don't eat it.
I'm not. It's
Yeah,
one of those things that I should try it, but
you
it's just
should.
like I want my blue cheese um juicy Lucy blue cheeseburger. So it's
That's
hard to
fair.
pass that
That's
up to
fair.
have the other. So
Now, do you have an opinion on what is the true Juicy Lucy in the Twin Cities? Because this can be a raging debate for some
it
people.
can, and I don't. The traditional is with American cheese, which
Mm-hmm.
to me is that cheese has a too high or too low of melting point.
Okay.
So when you bite into it, there's no cheese left unless
Sure.
you wait until the burger's not hot.
Right.
So I actually think you need a higher melting point cheese like cheddar,
Interesting.
or Swiss. Well, even Swiss, I think, will melt quite a bit.
Sure.
I think cheddar or blue is the word. But yeah, I know that traditionally it should be American, but as Burger Jones used to call it, it's government cheese. And
Yes.
I prefer not to get government cheese when I'm paying for it.
That's fair.
So
That's fair. It is interesting, the debates about which of the several restaurants in the Twin Cities that claim to have invented the Juicy Lucy really
yeah.
is, and which one has the best. That's always a fun debate to get into.
What's 5'8" and who's next to 5'8"?
Well,
I
there's
mean,
Matt's Bar.
Matt's Bar and 5'8" they're the ones that have had the Food Network
Mm-hmm.
battle of the Juicy
Mm-hmm.
Lucy's, I think. But
I've
I go
eaten.
to the
Yeah, I've eaten both. They're both great. To be very fair, I do the 5'8" resonates a little better for me, a little easier to get in and out of.
yeah.
A little more space. Matt's Bar
Yeah.
is about as big as my office, so it's a little cramped in there, but and I don't know the last time they cleaned their grill, but it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's all good stuff. You should try all of them.
Yeah.
All right, well, let me throw a few lightning round questions at you, and then we'll see where we end up here. So, how about coffee, espresso, or tea? What is your preferred caffeine intake device?
Coffee.
Okay, okay. How
Yeah.
do you take your tea?
Back to the person that served it
Because
to
there has
me.
been a horrible mistake. We actually, my son's homeroom teacher is the JV soccer coach, and his son plays on the same squad as Everett does, and so we see him quite a bit at games, unsurprisingly. And so one of the first games of the year, I said to him, I said, "Hey, when you see Everett on Monday, you should ask him how he takes his tea." And to his credit, he did. So that was a good back and forth. How about pie or cake?
Well, I will cheat like others do it and say cheesecake, even
Perfect.
though I don't consider it pie or cake. I consider it a class of its own.
Absolutely.
But New York plain cream cheesecake
Okay.
is the
Nice,
best.
nice. Yeah, I haven't made a cheesecake in forever. I should probably do that one of these days. I was threatening to make bread last night, and then I forgot. And then I realized that this morning that I forgot to make bread.
Yeah.
So that's okay.
Back
That's okay.
when I lived in Illinois for 7 years, I had a friend's husband that he would make cheesecake, and it was the best cheesecake. So um, miss those parts of Illinois, I guess, getting the cheesecake.
Now, you and I, neighbors, we're in the Midwest. We have neither of these. Oceans or
Yeah.
mountains?
Oceans.
Okay.
My mother-in-law actually has a place in North Carolina at Oak Island. It's been a while since I've been there with COVID and some other stuff work.
Sure.
But yeah, even though I can't say either is a must for me, but my kids love the beach, and
Sure.
there's something about that experience with them that's pretty good. We've been up Mount Spokane. In Spokane, I've driven up that hill. I've been up Pikes Peak back when I was a kid.
Yep.
Those just stress me out driving up those things when you can look over your shoulder and not see anything. But there was one time going up Mount Spokane, we met another vehicle at the narrowest part of the road.
Of course.
Of course. And I'm like, I don't want to do this again. So,
well, the thing, for anybody who's never driven up Pikes Peak, and you can't always get to the top, depending on the time of year, you end up getting stopped somewhere, along the route. But there are multiple signs about making sure your brakes don't overheat, and you kind of think whatever, and then you start going down, and you're basically pressing your brakes most of the way, and then you get the little warning light that pops up, and you're like, oh wait, they were serious. It is definitely a little different. And when you see those ramps on the way down for the runaway trucks, and you're like, that's a real thing.
we took the train up Pikes Peak when we did. We didn't
Cool.
drive it.
Okay.
So I have very little, I was 5, so I have very little memory other than being up it.
Right.
So
right. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So food trucks or Michelin star restaurant if we're going out to dinner tonight?
Food trucks.
Yeah.
Not that I remember where we used to overlap, there would be on Tuesdays that nice, I think it was Tuesdays, a string of food trucks there on Kellogg that was always fun to go
Yep.
to, try out new ones. You just had to eat early or you had to wait an hour in line
Right.
was
Right.
the downside.
Yeah, it was always interesting to see sort of who appeared where, and there were definitely several food trucks that like to make stops and down at St. Paul, and that was always a fun trip. Ebooks or paper books?
I would rather, I don't read enough. For fun, so I need to. I would do paper book for that, but from a tech standpoint, I'd prefer ebooks.
Okay.
Just because they're like this, well, they used to be like this
Right.
big.
Right.
But if I had to pick something up, I would definitely grab a paper book. Easier on the eyes.
Yeah.
The why, although my wife has one of the, I don't know if it's what's called paper white or
Mhm.
whatever one that looks pretty good, but I end up grabbing the iPad, and
Me too.
that's just, it gets tiring on your eyes after a while. Although that's what I read on the computer all the time. So
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I know when I got these glasses, that was part of the configuration. Is we're going to get the lenses that have the anti-reflective and the
yeah.
this and that. Oh yeah, you stare at a computer all day. All right, we'll give you the special grind. I'm like, okay, cool. Now, you've already mentioned a couple different sci-fi things, but Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, where do
I
you come
knew you
down
were
on
going to
that one?
ask
You
this
knew this
one,
was coming.
and I would have to say neither.
Okay, that's
I would
bold statement.
that that is bold. From I've never seen Game of Thrones, so and people would be like, "Wow!" So
Neil. Okay, so before you can come back on the show, you're gonna have to watch Game
yeah,
of Thrones. We'll do a Game of Thrones edition.
yeah. So I guess I knew I was going to get in trouble for this one.
No, it's
I knew I'd
fine.
be.
It's fine. It's. I mean, I could say Star Wars or Star Trek if you'd rather answer that one.
Yeah, I grew up more Star Trek than Star
Sure.
Wars, but I find a way that they both should work. You should be able to include both of them.
Absolutely.
But I grew up more of a Trek fan, although I was when Marshall got Star Wars. Now, granted, 10,000 people, no digital releases, so the film had to go through Sioux Falls,
Right.
other big cities before Marshall would get it. I don't know how many weeks beyond release weekend did it take us, but my
Sure.
brothers and I were there on opening weekend in Marshall. I don't know how many weeks that was behind,
Right.
probably 6.
Right.
But I was there, and I love Star Wars. The original 3,
Yeah.
I love immensely.
I have to say, one of the most exciting things for me as a parent was showing Everett Star Wars for the first time. Literally and truly, I was like borderline like vibrating how excited I was to be able to share this with him. So we've now seen all of them. We've seen all the series, and it's been a real pleasure to be able.
And although Ted Lasso is still the show of last season, the show of the season before was Mandalorian.
Oh, 100%.
It, I, how Favreau was able to make a show after Return of the Jedi in the timeline, still fit the
Yep.
timeline in appearance, but use new technology, how he blended them together, and his storytelling puts the prequels and 7, 8, 9 to shame.
Well, it's. I mean, we should probably do a Mandalorian episode. See, now you're
We
giving me all
should.
sorts of ideas.
Yeah.
The thing I love about it is it's so true to the original sort of gunslinger Western feel
Yes.
of the first three. And people kind of forget that's really what Lucas was doing, was a Western that takes place in space.
Yeah.
And Favreau just runs with that, and I think did it too brilliant. You can just see it in the storyboards and in the sound and just the feel of it. It's a Western set in outer space.
When Favreau was the ultimate fighting champion on Friends and Monica's boyfriend, did you ever think that he could
Yes.
revive Star Wars?
No, no. What an interesting arc, right? To have gone from
Yeah.
and I'd kind of forgotten he'd been on the show until we watched it. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot he
Yeah.
had like a 5 or 6 show run, and then yeah, or even just seeing him as Iron Man's chauffeur, as Tony Stark's
Yeah.
chauffeur, basically.
Yeah.
Like, okay, he's got a bit part, and then he's gonna start directing, and he's gonna actually direct really well. And
I know.
okay, yeah, it's a lot of talent there. All right, how about cats or dogs? Since my cat has made an appearance and your dog was scratching at the door.
Well, I grew up on a farm with both.
Nice.
Always had a dog, had 20, we had a dairy farm, so I had 20 cats. I would have always said I was a cat person until I got Katniss, our dog. Now I'm a dog person.
Okay.
So I guess she's named after Katniss Everdeen, but she does act like a cat. Maybe that's why I like her so much. So
See, my in-laws have a little lap dog, and I told my son at one point, I said, if you're gonna get a dog, get a dog. Like, if you're gonna get a cat, get a cat. Don't get a dog that's the size of a cat. Kind of defeats the purpose, in my opinion. It's like
she's
all
a
the
dachshund mix, so she's
sure,
more than a cat, but she
sure,
loves to lie on her back and get her tummy rubbed like some cats do. And
nice, nice. We visited a farm yesterday. Friends had a birthday party at a farm near us, and so we went and visited. And they had goats, and they had chickens, and they had cats and dogs running around. The goats were like little pets. I mean, these three little goats kept walking around, basically saying, please pet me, and kind of rub on your leg. And it's like, okay. So I told them they needed to do goat yoga. Their business up. But all right, no, night owl or morning lark? When do you prefer to get things done?
it used to be both. Now it's hard with either. More of a morning. I mean, I'm usually up by 6 type time frame, kids, school, and
Yeah,
that. In college, I would stay up until 2, 3, 4 in the morning. But yeah, as I've gotten older, I've switched to the morning, mostly because commuting required it.
right.
If you didn't want to spend an hour in commuting up to 394, 494
Mm-hmm.
back in 02, 03, went from 30 minutes to 45 minutes without traffic
Right.
and then adjusting for time. I mean, there's some trips home that would be an hour, 15
Oh yeah.
minutes. So I would try to shift as early as I could so I could leave before traffic got bad. So commuting made me a morning person.
Yeah, it's fun how that switch happens to most of us. Most people in college don't even bother calling me before 10 a.m. In fact,
Yeah.
my school, the main dining hall on the weekends didn't even open up until a quarter to 11. There was nothing and there were places you go to eat, but not the main dining hall. But
Yeah.
then you get in the real world, and all of a sudden, you're awake at 7 a.m. whether you want to be or not, or 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. But I don't think we're the only state where we somebody asks you, well, how far away is it, and you don't give it in miles, you give it in time. Well, that's about 35 minutes. I totally can relate to that.
Yeah.
All right, what about Emacs or Vim?
Back in the day, well, both, but I use Vim still. I still call it VI because I used it before Vim existed. Um, I still use VI to this day, and I use IntelliJ for development. I don't use Emacs, but I do use Emacs for keyboard navigation because it's
Yes,
usually default for shell. I was always one of those that used both and always thought both. I never took sides, and I would advocate
smart.
for both of them. I when I'm editing so I do all my Java development in IntelliJ, and I do YAML file editing usually at the command line in
Okay,
Vim. So my Docker compose files, my bash scripts. When I'm in IntelliJ, I then start typing the IJK or get into insert mode, hitting escape. So I'm very much realized that YAML files for like Docker compose and shell scripts, I always just bring up a terminal and go to
sure,
VI.
sure.
I don't have Emacs installed anymore. I don't think I
Okay.
ever really did going into web development. So I guess I would have to say VI just because I use that daily. But I used to write Emacs Lisp in my own. Um, I didn't. I used to read email inside Emacs. I used Procmail
Wow.
and I used some other Emacs tools. So back when I was a C programmer on Sun and Solaris, I used to use Emacs for reading all my email. So
Checks out. Checks
yeah,
out. So
back
that
in the
that
day.
that actually gives me another question that I'm curious to get your thoughts on. Is YAML an improvement over XML?
Um, Depends. uh,
Okay,
yes,
we're all
I think
architects here. We get
yeah.
it, Neil.
It is better for configuration because um, I'm sorry, going into a Maven POM file to edit, it's like I have to scroll through 27 pages. So YAML for configuration, I find a lot easier. But my gosh, make file tabs and spaces. That was a mistake back in the day. Why YAML adopted that,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that has to be spaces and not, I just don't understand that one. And some of the other YAML mistakes were around, we need to be smarter about true and false. So we're going to
Sure.
make no be false. So if you don't quote no for Norway, if you have Norway as a 2-letter abbreviation in a YAML file, that gets treated as false. I don't like what the smartness they try to do
Sure.
messed you up. If they didn't do that, I would definitely say YAML. But that those edge cases that they were trying to be cutesy with just
Right.
make mistakes. As far as marshaling data to someone else, so that would be XML over YAML. That's why I say it depends. I would say JSON or Avro or Protobuf over XML, but I would never expect to use YAML for marshaling of data.
Sure. Sure.
You can sort of see what I do on a daily basis now. I get pretty passionate about this one.
Well, but that's one of the points I've tried to make to folks that when you've worked with something long enough, you see where the edge cases are. And that doesn't mean you hate the tool. It doesn't mean it's
Right.
bad because of these edge cases, but you know where the edge of the map is, you know where the dragons are.
Right.
And that's I've always used that as my litmus test to figure out, does this person really have they had enough experience with it? Because if you can't sort of give me an answer to what don't you like about YAML, then okay, you really haven't worked with it, have you? And that's not a bad thing because you'll figure it
Right.
out. You and to be very clear, someone else's list of what they don't like about a given tool is going to differ from mine, and that's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for, will you agree with what I think sucks? It's you've worked with it long enough to know where some of those rough edges, the friction happens.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, I know we could keep going, but I know you've got a real job, and I need to get this video up. And I think the video actually is going to be decent this time. I must have finally mastered the OBS settings to make this all work, so
Excellent.
it's not nearly as bad as last week's. I apologize to Olga for the poor quality of my video, but the audio was good. So,
Well, that's the only part that matters, right?
so I guess you and I'll have to schedule another one to talk about Mandalorian then. So we'll have to figure
Well,
something out for
that and we left season 2 alone
we
for
did.
Ted Lasso.
We did.
So
Yeah, so we'll have to figure out what the statute of limitations is, and then we'll
yeah,
schedule the other one about Ted Lasso, and we'll go from
yeah,
there.
excellent.
Well, I do appreciate your time. We're gonna be off for a couple weeks for various scheduling issues, and then Alan Hollab will be with us on the show. I'm looking forward to catching up with him. He helped convince me I needed a better grinder for my coffee experience, so I upgraded to a much better coffee grinder, and it has definitely made a difference in my morning espresso routine. So, although he definitely has more disposable income than I do, because his recommendation for an espresso machine very expensive. So I not in fact spend that much money on my espresso machine. I did spend a lot more on my grinder than I ever would have expected, much to my CFO's chagrin. But anyway, well, Neil, thank you so much for your time, man. I appreciate it. And to everybody else, we'll see you in a couple weeks, and have a good October. Oh my God, it's already October. Where did the year go?
No idea.
No idea.